Hello, I'm Maurice Powell. Welcome to A Little Light Music, Manx Radio's regular Thursday evening classical music hour. Now, we finished our programme last week with a couple of short pieces by Hayden Wood, so I'm going to begin this evening's programme with another short piece by Hayden Wood, but there is method in my madness. This is a march I've not played before. It's called Torch of Freedom. I've only managed to find one recording of this march dating from way back in the 1950s. It was written by Hayden Wood in the 1940s. It's a very patriotic march, as you might imagine from the title Torch of Freedom. And I'm playing it because it's a way of advertising a huge concert that's coming up here at the Villa Marina in May. There'll be more about this in a couple of weeks. But in May, the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra and the Slathwaite Symphony Orchestra are combining together for a huge concert, the main work of which will be Mahler's First Symphony. I don't think that's been heard here for many years, if ever. So that's going to be a wonderful concert. But we're going to open the concert with the Hayden Wood March because, as many of you will know, Hayden Wood was born in Slaithwaite and spent his childhood here on the Isle of Man. So it's always been a very pleasant occasion when the two orchestras from the two towns come together. Enough of that for the time being, but there will be more about this extraordinary concert coming up in May. In the meantime, Hayden Wood, Torch of Freedom. Hayden Wood's Torch of Freedom, written in the 1940s and recorded in the 1950s by Jack Lyon and his orchestra. Now, Jack Lyon was a famous band leader who came here to the Isle of Man in the late 40s, early 50s to conduct the dance orchestra here for the summer holidays. Very interesting chap in his own right. But anyway, a little bit of Hayden Wood. Now, let's move from perhaps a composer who is regarded as the prince of British light music, Hayden Wood, to the king of British light music, Eric Coates, and a piece I've not played before. It's a fantasy for orchestra called The Selfish Giant, written in 1925, commissioned by the Eastbourne Festival. And it included what at the time was thought of as some rather daring syncopations, evoking kind of like the dance band music of the period. In fact, Jack Hilton's band took this particular piece into their repertoire. Now, the syncopations don't seem very extreme to us today, but syncopated dance music was very fashionable in the 1920s. I mean, the composer Billy Mayle even had his own school of syncopation to encourage people to introduce sort of syncopated rhythms into their music. Coates wasn't really a jazz fan, but one or two of his compositions do have these kind of syncopated rhythms in. The Selfish Giant was inspired by the story of Oscar Wilde about a garden where it's always winter and children are forbidden to play. So, the orchestral fantasy, The Selfish Giant, by Eric Coates. The orchestral fantasy The Selfish Giant, written in 1925 by Eric Coates. And this goes to show that the greatest of the light music composers were capable of writing quite extended works. I mean, Hayden Wood, for example, wrote a symphony. Sadly, the score has been lost. He also wrote a piano concerto and a violin concerto, both of which are very fine. Coates himself didn't write either a concerto or a symphony, certainly not as far as I'm aware. Robert Farnon, sort of in the next generation of light music composers, did write symphonies, and Ernest Tomlinson, whose theme music begins every programme, The Little Serenade, he wrote 2 symphonies for orchestra and jazz orchestra, one of which I heard on a very peculiar tape from a Russian radio broadcast of all things years ago, and they both seem to me to be very fine, very interesting. Other composers as well dabbled in sort of what you might call more serious, extended classical pieces. But there we are, the Selfish Giant there, Eric Coates. Now for something, ridiculous. This is a piece by David Rose, My Dog Has Fleas. David Rose, My Dog Has Fleas, the kind of piece you either find really amusing and entertaining or intensely annoying. It leads us quite naturally, of course, to the music of Robert Schumann. I'm going to play the slow movement Largamente from one of his finest chamber pieces. This is a lovely, lovely piece. It's the piano quintet, piano and string quartet, which was composed between September and October 1842 in a quite extraordinary sort of burst of creative energy. The whole work is very extroverted and exuberant and has probably remained his most popular piece of chamber music. He wrote it for his wife Clara, of course, who was a famous pianist, but she was unfortunately ill at the time of the first private performance of the work at their home. So Mendelssohn, no less, stepped in at the last minute and sight-read the entire piece at the first performance. What a clever chap was Mendelssohn. So the Largamente then from the piano quintet, it's a kind of a funeral march with a very agitated middle section, but very beautiful, and gravely beautiful perhaps. The lovely Largamente from Robert Schumann's Piano Quintet in E-flat major. A lovely piece. And now to the music of Roger Quilter, one of the most amiable and English of English composers. Before that, a brief announcement. I did refer to this concert last week and probably the week before, but it's a very important concert which I'm sure will be very well supported. This is the annual concert of the Isle of Man Choral Society together with the Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra and conducted by Mandy Griffin. The date is Sunday the 6th of April. The venue, the Royal Hall at the Villa Marina, and the time is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a programme of French music, some of it sacred, such as Fauré's gorgeous Requiem and Poulenc's colourful and entertaining Gloria, and also extracts from Bizet's Carmen, probably the most performed opera ever written. So it's a really mixed programme, something for everybody, and I shall be lurking in the orchestra as I no longer conduct anymore, but I do like to play, and I shall be playing in the orchestra for Mandy's concert, and it's going very well indeed. Tickets are going very well, so it should be a wonderful afternoon. So that's the Isle of Man Choral Society, Isle of Man Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Mandy Griffin, Sunday the 6th of April, Villa Marina, 3 o'clock, Fauré, Poulenc, Bizet. So, Roger Quilter. I like the music of Roger Quilter, and it's the sort of composer I would have liked to have met, I think. He was apparently tall, shy, softly spoken, quite unlike his eccentric friend Percy Grainger, who we heard from last week and we do hear from time to time. He's remembered today mainly for his songs and a few piano pieces, but he was quite a versatile composer. It was Grainger himself who encouraged him to write these three English dances, Opus 11, and they were written in 1910 for a small orchestra. They were first performed at the Queen's Hall in London, and they were published 2 years later in 1912. There are three movements to these dances, and I'm going to play all three. They don't have titles, but just three English dances by Roger Quilter. English Dances by Roger Quilter. Charming music, absolutely delightful. Right, let's get serious for a few minutes. Beethoven. Now, some of Beethoven's overtures are very well known indeed. Coriolan, Egmont particularly, The Creatures of Prometheus we hear quite often, and of course Fidelio, the overture to his one and only opera. But there are a few other overtures we never hear of, such as Name Day, the Consecration of the House, The Ruins of Athens, or King Stephen. And they're full of really interesting music. I'm going to play the overture to King Stephen. This was a play, music for a play, that Beethoven wrote in 1811. It consists of an overture and 9 vocal pieces, and it's virtually never heard today, which is a pity, because the overture shows Beethoven in really quite a jovial mood. The story is really about the founder of the Kingdom of Hungary, King Stephen, there from around the year 1000. I don't suppose the play is ever revived, but the music that Beethoven wrote, even the 9 vocal pieces, which are very little known, are quite charming, some of them, and often more than that. However, here's the overture then to Beethoven's incidental music for the play King Stephen. Little known overture there by Beethoven, the overture to the incidental music he wrote for the play King Stephen in 1811. I think it's a rather fine piece. Doesn't outstay its welcome. It's about 5.5 minutes long and full of interesting things. It's a pity we don't hear these lesser known Beethoven overtures more often in the concert hall. Something completely different now, the music of Charles Wakefield Cadman, a little known British light music composer, but an attractive one nevertheless. Here is I Hear a Thrush at Eventide. I Hear a Thrush at Eventide by Charles Wakefield Cadman. That brings us to the end of the programme. Please join me next Thursday at 9. Something to play us out with, Peacock Patrol by Peter Barrington, whose real name was Felton Rapley. Goodbye.